We're gonna start with the Americana. Pretty like usually the first submission anyone learns from side control. So this one, first just to set up general side control in case you're not familiar with this position. This is side control. Important details here. Right now we're gonna go ahead and start from the 100 kilos side control. So that's where you have their head scooped and you have their arm scooped and you have, why am I blanking on words right now? Cable grip, thank you. My brain is still getting back into the swing of things after being sick last week. So you have a cable grip here. And one thing that's really important with side control is keeping your hips low. What we don't want to see is you in side control with your butt in the air. First of all, they can easily escape. Even if I have their hip blocked, if my hips are high, he can just roll me very easily. And I don't want that. So what I use as kind of are my hips low enough? Wherever the top of his body is, my hips should be a little below that. The lower the better, but I need to at least get them below the top of his body. So he's here, so I want my hips just below the top of his body. That makes me heavier, and now if he tries to roll me, it's going to be a lot harder. There's a couple ways you can do that. You can do both knees in, where I have one knee in the hip, one knee up by his head. As long as you can get your hips low enough for that, you're welcome to keep both knees up. If you don't have flexible hips, and that means putting your butt in the air, I would rather you not do that, so you can just drop the head side leg back so that you bring your hip low. So that's also, I like to do that a lot anyway, just because it spreads my weight out more and I'm tiny and it makes me a little bit heavier. So we're gonna start from here. So he's gonna start out, we'll start out where he has his hand not in a good spot and he's trying to get it into a better spot. A lot of people make the mistake of swinging that hand out really wide to do that. If they do that, I'm gonna unscoop his head and catch his wrist. And I'm just gonna pin it to the mat. I do not need to use my thumb to grab, just all my fingers together and just pin it to the mat. My other hand is still underneath his arm and I'm just gonna grab my own wrist. Same way, no thumb. Once I'm here, I'm going to hug everything in nice and tight so his arm makes a nice tight Z. I don't want it way loose out here. Nice and tight. I'm gonna lift his elbow just a little bit. Notice his fingers are still on the mat. I don't wanna lift the whole thing. And I'm gonna bring his fingers towards his hip, slowly. And when he taps, I let go. So we're here, good side control, my hips are low. He's gonna bring his hand in front. I unscoop his head, grab his wrist, pin it down. My other hand just grabs my own wrist. I'm going to scrunch everything in nice and tight here, and my elbow is like in his ear right now. My elbow lifts up just a little bit to bring his elbow off the mat, keeping his fingers on the mat. And I'm just going to bring his fingers towards his hip. Nice and slow. It does not take much if you have it tight. Any questions?
Can you talk about this one?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this arm, it's already starting out underneath his arm. So as he brings his arm in front, it's staying put. So notice I didn't really move that arm. I just met my other arm and I'm keeping it right underneath his shoulder here. And I'm just hugging it, everything in tight. So my elbows are still close to his body. My wrist is just under his shoulder. I'm hugging everything in. Lift the elbow, bring that down. Is that what you want? Okay. Any other questions? Anyone need to see it again? All right, 1, 2, 3. doing a little bit to get that, but I'm not trying to like twist it this way. Like I do get it eventually, but notice how much I have to lean to even do that. That's not the most practical thing. So I'm just I'm crunching this in really tight. I can do it if it's a little looser, but it goes a little further. Like it takes just a little longer. And on someone with flexible shoulders, like I have pretty flexible shoulders, it's gonna be a lot harder to finish the lock if you don't pull everything in nice and tight. And it's also harder for him to like muscle his arms straight out of that. From here, he can probably muscle his arms straight, which we'll address in a minute. But from here, if I really want the Americana, if he tries to muscle his arms straight now, he can't. So now, lift the elbow. He already tapped and I didn't even bring his fingers towards his hip. This lock is often referred to as a paintbrush. His arm is the paintbrush. His fingers are the bristles. So I want to keep my paintbrush on the canvas and I want to paint a line to his hip. I'm not actually going to get to his hip though. Cool? Try it a few more times. 1, 2, 3. So I start to go for this. He knows what I'm doing. He's on to that. So he's gonna try to start fishing his arm around to protect it. So I can get to his wrist and I wanna get his wrist to the mat. So I don't want him to be able to like grab his belt or stuff or anything like that because that makes this a lot harder. So if I get to his wrist, I wanna try to get it to the mat. And I'm gonna get the same exact type of grip. So no thumbs, grab my own wrist. So it's just like an inverse of what we were doing. So we were here, now other hand is on his wrist, and then grab my own wrist. From here, I'm going to turn towards his head to be able to apply this. This is the Kimura. When I do this one, I don't want to just go straight into applying it because I have to turn and turn. And I might get it eventually. I might also just like bring him with me. And now I'm on bottom. That's not great. So to prevent that, I'm going to get into my lock here. I'm going to turn and I'm going to step over his face. I'm just going to put the back of my thigh on his face so that he can't sit up. And now I can apply the lock. And he can't come with me, so when I start to apply it, I don't have to turn nearly as much to get it to work. So we're here, I'm going for that. He turns, I'm gonna get to his wrist and drop it onto the mat. No thumbs. Grab my own wrist, no thumbs. Again, I wanna keep this a nice tight angle. I don't want it to be really wide here where he can easily just pull his arm out of that. From here, I have a better chance if he tries to straighten his arm. He can't. I'm gonna turn so that my hips are facing him, his head, and I'm gonna step to the other side of his head so that my leg goes across his face. And now I'm just going to let his elbow come off the mat a little bit so that there's room for me to bring his, basically I'm trying to bring his hand towards the back of his head. So we're here, I'm gonna try to bring his hand to the back of his head, slowly, because it's not gonna get there. He taps, let go. Any questions?
Why do they call this move the Kimura?
Wasn't it that like a judo guy tapped out a jiu-jitsu guy with it, so they named it after him, right?
Sounds something badass like that.
Yeah.
Is this the Redding one?
Yeah, I mean, you can. So what she's talking about is the motion with my hands, like I'm revving a motorcycle. So notice how that also helps lock in his arm for that Kimura. I think I was doing that and not saying that. Step over.
And then one more thing, the really cool thing about this move is So there's a side control escape where I try to get the underhook, so I could actually get the underhook. So if Stephanie's trying to underhook me on this side, I can bait it a little bit, and I can actually reach back and grab her wrist and then bring it back down and get that Kimura. So it's just like a good counter to that escape. So just something to know. Yeah.
Any questions? Anyone need to see again?
I'll see you one more time.
Okay. Here. So I'm going for my Americana, so he's feeding that arm, or maybe he's trying to do the underhook, whatever. I'm gonna get that wrist, put it on the mat, feed my arm underneath his tricep, grab my own wrist, pull his wrist in nice and tight here, turn towards him, step over. Notice when I step over, I'm not like keeping my leg really low and like kneeing him in the face on the way through. I mean, you can do that, but in training, it's not cool. It's not nice to your partner. I don't like to roll with people who knee me in the face. So I step nice and high and come down foot first on the other side so that I am not kneeing him in the face every time I rep this. And then once I get here, let him come up a little bit so I have room to try to bring that wrist through. I'm not just stepping my leg over and keeping my knee high like this. Because if I do that, he still can turn into me a lot. Once I get my foot over, I want to like straighten my leg out a bit so that I'm pinning his head to the ground with my leg. So now, as I come up, notice how much less I had to move here versus here. So once you step over, straighten your leg out, really pin their head down, and it's gonna be a lot easier. Keep going. 1, 2, 3. I'll just go ahead and address this one real quick because it came up a couple times and it is good feedback. If for some reason you're having trouble getting this arm isolated, like if they're really pushing back on it, especially if they're a lot stronger, there's a couple things you can do. Lots of times what I do is, first of all, I'm driving hard with my knee towards the top of his head, and I can use my other leg, like my thigh or my hip, behind his elbow to help drive that over. And that's gonna help a lot of the time. And I just need to get my knee to the other side of his head so I can pin his head down. And you can also just be mean and put your shin on their face or neck and be a jerk like that. I mean, it's totally valid. It's not that. It's kind of mean, but it's valid. But yeah, I like knee moves. Let's see. So we're here trying to do this, and maybe I'm a little bit too loose with this and he's able to straighten his arm out. I'm going to let my grip carry with it, and I'm going to basically keep the same position here, and I bring my elbow out a little bit more here, my right one, keeping my hand on his wrist. If I can, I do like to control the meat of the thumb here so that he can't turn his hand, like twist it very easily. If you have control of the meat of the thumb, they can't like rotate their hand as easily. And from here, this is really that revving motion that Jayla mentioned earlier. This is really where this is gonna come into play. I'm going to, like I'm revving a motorcycle, and this is an arm bar. So one thing that's important here, so when we're here, notice my arm is already just behind his elbow when I'm doing this Kimura. That's good. And as he straightens it, I want to keep it at that spot. So I'm right here, just above, like just closer to his body, above his elbow. Was that like proximal?
Yeah, the other one's good.
Yeah, I know things. So we're here, and I'm revving. So what that's doing is this is creating a fulcrum with my bony wrist right underneath that kind of soft spot above the elbow, and I'm bending his arm over that fulcrum the wrong direction. So thumb to the ceiling is important here, and that's another reason why I like to try to grab out at the wrist here so that I can keep him from rotating that as much as possible. Again, I like mean things, and I'm also shorter than a lot of people. So if you need to, you can kind of pin their head with your knee to get a little closer and do the same thing. But it's a little bit riskier that way to getting bridged. But if you really can't reach their arm, it is a thing you can do. So here, he straightens. I'm gonna try to keep that grip, and I'm just, his thumb is to the ceiling, and I'm just revving. Any questions?
So would you ever do this from the Americana? Do people normally straighten their arm doing the Americana?
Yeah, people definitely straighten their arm during the Americana. You can. I feel like you can do it from this grip, but I'm not good at it, and so I usually have to switch grips. So it's a little bit harder for me to do it from there. Because this I find to be a lot easier. Do you do it from this grip? Okay, I didn't think so.
I struggle with it.
Yeah, like I can't do that one. So I don't do it from there as much, just because that grip switch is a little bit trickier for me to catch it in live rolling. It's usually, because usually they don't keep it straight for long, so it's usually a little bit easier to get to here. But if you get to here and they straighten it, you're well set up for this.